their counts of ballots, are you giving them any more money to help do that?
Working, in fact, we've had detailed conversations with the legislature, and it was mutually agreed that we would work together over the course of the next month as we balance the budget to land specifically what those investments may look like, and we both agreed on that. So on the basis of that question, no new resources in today's presentation, but absolute full commitment and cooperation with the legislature to land that in the final budget deal. What you're referring to is a letter I put out to all the county registrars to say, get your act together, get these ballots counted. I'm very concerned that if we don't do that, particularly on the basis of the new rules and regulations that we've now implemented, where we're requiring them to do so, I think it will expose us to the accusations that will be exploited by the Trump administration.
You talk about how the big three are responsible for propping up the White House with money that they receive. How do you square that with people clamoring for there to be more regulation on this industry that is such a big part of life?
Well, the big three in this case is the corporate tax, the income tax, and the capital gains space. But as it relates to the engines of our economic growth, it's not just tech. It's interesting. You go back to that slide on the 40% growth in the GDP since 2019, and there's a great Bloomberg article on this that stress tested it. It's in the healthcare space. It's interesting. The buffer on our investments have actually impacted our GDP growth in a significant way. Our investments in higher education, education broadly, and in technology, it's sort of three-legged stool in that respect, represented in a lot of the analysis that Bloomberg did in terms of our GDP. Again, which is just dumb. Proud of it. And it's important that we maintain that focus, and it goes to your question, I think, is how we, that's why I have opinions about some of the ballot measures. At the same time, I have opinions. There's many ballot measures that we're going to likely see on initiatives on the ballot. It's why I vetoed certain legislation. It's represented in all of my budgets, is trying to find that balance. It's represented in SB 53, and the fact that we worked with Fei Li in Stanford and Carnegie, worked with Berkeley and MIT, and put out a white paper around regulation. We're the first to regulate large language models and frontier models, the first safety regulation in America, the first to do a big executive order before Biden administration. And you'll be seeing in the next few days additional announcements in the space as it relates to tech and regulation. You also know my position on 16 and younger, and been very clear on that. I'm very proud of California's nation-leading efforts to regulate, at the same time not to over-regulate, so we continue to inspire more innovation.
How does your plan factor in the proposed area of resources for regulations, and with revenue expected to drop, where those regulations are going through, would you and how would you shift those funding priorities?
Well, none of that's going to be factored into this fiscal budget, this year's fiscal budget. It's a draft proposal, so we're working to listen to all the stakeholders as it relates to that, and we'll work with a number of legislative leaders as well on this, the caucuses, and inform some of these conversations. Already made some adjustments from the original draft at the Air Resources Board, and will continue to, but it doesn't directly impact the presentation that was announced today.
You talked about some lower costs.
I'm sorry, just real quick.
Governor, I know you admire Bobby Kennedy. He once said, "You will have the greatness to bend history itself, that each of us can work to change a small portion of events." You've shaped this balanced budget in California's direction over the last 8 years. In this governor's race, would you agree that an endorsement of a Democratic
Oh, look at you. That was.
It
It goes right to the heart with Bobby. I take my guard down, and then you try to get me to answer the question I refuse to answer.
Would you agree that this represents one of those moments where you can still change a small portion of and you've spoken
Did
about
you have chat do that question for you?
I
Very
tested it. I like
sophisticated.
mine better. But you've spoken about accountability. Do you think Democrats will hold you accountable for standing by this principled neutrality by withholding your endorsement in this non-possible scenario where two Republicans take the ticket?
Yeah, look, my focus has been making sure that doesn't happen, and I've exercised not just a focus, but I've exercised through some action efforts to encourage that doesn't happen by making my case, and we'll will continue to make my case. I do not see that scenario taking place. I see a lot of good Democrats I've worked with for years and years and years on the ballot making their case. I was in a similar position with a similar stubborn governor that refused to get involved. I developed tremendous animus towards him, and now I offer forgiveness.
Do you regret it, Governor? If it's not impossible.
We don't dream regretting. We all have agencies. We can shape the future. There's still a lot. I've said this before, so I'll repeat it. I don't anticipate this needing to be the case, but there is a break the glass scenario, and there's many people that have a deep understanding of what it would look like if Democrats were locked out, and we're going to do everything to make sure that doesn't happen.
Governor, your former Chief of Staff, Dina Williamson, just pleaded guilty in federal court to 3 counts. What's your reaction to that development?
I just literally, as I was in the elevator, someone mentioned it. So forgive me for not having the opportunity to get into the details of it. We will, after I understand exactly what the plea was. But look, it's hard. I just think of her daughter, but also mindful accountability. We're all got to be held to the letter of the law and accountable. But it's on a personal basis. For kids, it's tough. But I don't know the details of it. I'll just leave it at that.
Well, one of the counts she pled guilty to lying to the FBI, including, and this was in the indictment that came out last year. One of those things was related to her time as your Chief of Staff. She passed along, she says, information.
That was wrong. I mean, if that's one of the things she was ultimately pled guilty, if you do that, that's against the law. We have high ethical standards, and that's just wrong. Period.
Governor Newsom,
Jose, no, I promised I'm going to get yelled at from my San Francisco representative.
On the budget, you talk about belt tightening. Can you give us some examples? This is a very modest growth in general fund compared to years past. Where are we seeing that squeeze? Where are those cuts happening?
Well, I mean, look, I imagine you'll get folks that say that have strong opinions about the asset test, have strong opinions about predeterminations as it relates to utilization management. They'll have strong opinions about aspects of premiums, and folks will have other component concerns that are reflected not in the slides today, but will be reflected in the presentation in a moment from Erica and Joe. And all those, the sum total of all those things sort of add up to, in the short run, $1.2 billion of lower costs. At the same time, we're trying to balance that by being a little more creative on the revenue side, which I think I hopefully effectively highlighted as it relates to digital services that hadn't been considered in the past, and the MCO, which has always been a source of revenue consideration as it relates to supporting healthcare in this state, particularly in light of the cuts from HR 1, and that's why cause and effect in that respect is so important and connected. And just the ongoing efficiencies that I highlighted that continue, and I'll continue to advance.
Governor, about two big city mayors who stood right there where you live, Long Beach, Riverside, Oakland, Stockton, Sacramento, and they were concerned about cuts to IHHP, the seventh round, $500 million, and they were concerned about that because the progress that they have been making as far as homeless programs and housing. They say they're not.
Well, it's not a cut; it's another $500 million. This was never an entitlement. As a former mayor, I can assure you, we never got any support when I was mayor. Not a dollar. This is one of a dozen areas of support. HAP is one of a dozen areas of support across the spectrum. And I would encourage you to go to that website that I highlighted. We'll show you a lot of the new initiatives the state has advanced. I can get into BH Connected, $8 billion. I can get into $2.9 billion of bridge housing. I can get into the issues of youth mental health at $4.2 billion. I can get to the $6.38 billion on Proposition 1. None of this existed at the scale it existed today. The $500 million is new money. They want $1 billion. I get it. I want accountability. I want results that are visible. results. And I think focusing on visible results is really the emphasis I like to see. To the extent they can make their case to the legislature that they can find an additional $500 million and not impact the most vulnerable, that's the case they're likely to make. I'm empathetic to the challenges the mayors face, but I'm also deeply prideful of the investments this administration has made to have their back and to get us back in the right direction on addressing the crisis of homelessness in the state.
And the issues of SNAP and Medicare, the President of the United States is suing IRS $10 billion. And we got all these other cuts going on. I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Come on, it's just sick. The graft, the corruption, seeing his son in China, come on. It's sick. He's negotiating against himself to take $10 billion of your money. And there's still people on TV counting to this every single night. They know who they are. One of them was on the screen earlier. It's a disgrace. Negotiating with himself, $10 billion settlement, $230 million that he wants from the DOJ, not just the $10 billion from the IRS. Do we have to go through the 8 large-scale golf and development deals he's done across the globe? You think for a second, folks that got off Air Force One yesterday in Beijing don't have an economic agenda for themselves that will enrich members and associates of the Trump family? I mean, in the most benign version of it, how about all those poor souls that put $100 down for the gold cell phone and haven't received it? The sneakers. I'm not even going to World Liberty Financial. I'm not even talking about crypto. I'm not talking about $400 million. Oh wait, not $400 million Qatari planes. There's another 937 or 950 $1 million in the Pentagon budget to retrofit that. I can go on for another 45 minutes of examples. Witkoff and Kushner's, the Board of Peace, so he can get a piece of the Middle East. I mean, it's this is next level. Lack of accountability on this is extraordinary, and the damage he did. Now back to the budget. These cuts on HR 1. I mean, additional $3.4 trillion to the deficit. That's sacking your kids and grandkids. The cuts, 44,000. By the way, just on the cuts, it's important to note we substantially, because of work we're doing, we're providing resources to the counties, we're addressing some of the work requirement issues. The January to May budget reflects a significantly lower number of people dropping off of our Medi-Cal program. 44,000 goes up to 446. And specifically on the food stamp side, we're still trying to do more there, but we did offer for consideration 30 million for the food banks. Additional resources, legislature I imagine may want to do even more there. And we continue to go after nation-leading efforts on fraud, 83% reduction in EBT fraud. Even a member of the Trump administration applauded our efforts in that space.
Governor, on kids' mental health, there's the $4.2 billion on CYBHI. This is one of your signature efforts, including $1.3 billion that was spent to help get services, mental health services in schools and help schools be able to bill insurance companies for that. At this point, we're at the end of the 5-year CYBHI period. Only about 1 in 5 of the schools that have signed up have even filed a claim. And there's hundreds of districts that are not participating. 180 have gotten any kind of reimbursement. And we know there's like 2,500 eligible educational agencies. Do you consider this program, specifically also the fee schedule, a success? And what do you propose in this budget in terms of continuing any investments in CYBHI?
Well, it sounds like you got an article you've written, and I'm going to walk myself right into it. So I'm going to take the opportunity to have my team compare and contrast notes on this topic, and I'll get back to you. I think that
do you have an
justice.
Opinion on whether it's a success?
I think making investments in wellness, not just physical health, but mental health for our kids is a good investment. I think Saluna's been a great investment. I think the investments we've made to build wellness centers in our public schools has been historic, and I think we have a lot more work to do to deal with the crisis of our time. And on the issue of mental health, no other state in the nation has done more. And to the extent we have to continue to drive these unprecedented investments and drive local accountability, I'm all in the spirit of your question, and look forward to the team getting back, comparing your assessment with our assessment, and then trying to fill any gap of consciousness.
Governor, on Calif, please, three-part question for you.
Oh my gosh, well, where's my Calif expert?
Just a quick hit, Governor. Are you sad that you have had to propose cut to such a signature initiative? Do you plan to submit new 1915 B and 1115 waivers?
Can we just do that? Yeah.
They expire at the end of the year, so.
I just wrote a letter
are
on
you
that.
worried that the Trump administration will say no?
Well, that's a separate question. Yeah, so we did submit. It was a week or it was a week or so ago.
But that didn't include community support or ECM.
Yeah, so we're working. Look, this administration is not the easiest to work with when it comes to 1332s, 1115s, and all these other waivers, the MCO, and issues around hospital quality assurance fees. You saw the impacts on that, which impact our deficit this year. By the way, that's a new impact beyond just the HR1. And you know, there's a lot sitting on their desk. You know, there's the benefit side of this on hearing aids that's sitting on Dr. Oz's desk, has been for a year. He hasn't moved on it. So yeah, I'm concerned about all those things. As relates to sadness, no, I'm a pragmatist. And it's not just more, it's better. Look, Calif is amazing. It's about whole person care, taking the pilot projects that we inherited in 2018, 2019, putting them in scale across the state, integrating the issues of brain health and physical health, focusing on housing, getting those waivers from the Biden administration, which were profound. We got those right before he left. And stitching all this together, all these investments, stitching them all together, driving accountability in a state, again, larger than 21 state populations combined. But, you know, I'm proud of, you know, I was talking to Dr. Galley about it, to your question, you know, how much progress we did make. I was trying to stress test some of these adjustments, saying, what can we afford to do here? And I think this is where we landed on the utilization side, that were relatively modest considering the magnitude of investments, the billions and billions that we put in this space. But SAD may not paint that picture. Pride in the investments and hope that those investments can be maintained, and to the extent hope that we have an administration in Washington, D.C. that understands the nation-leading reforms that we're advancing as national best practices and that the waivers are afforded us.
Well, you are concerned about that, to be fair.
I mean, how can you not be with this administration? I mean, this is an administration, again, that's negotiating with itself for $10 billion tithing in a settlement with the IRS. I mean, this is a different level of corruption. This is someone who said a ballroom is going to cost $150 million. No, then it's $200 million. No, it's $300 million. Then it's 100% paid for by private sector. Now it's $1 billion. This is the guy who said he had a pool guy that did a lot of pool stuff, does a sole source contract, gets it for $1.8 million. Now it's $13.1 million. I mean, just the incompetency at the level and scale, likes of which we've never experienced. The recklessness in terms of destroying an economy that was the envy of the world, hardly perfect. The jobs were booming when he got here. Inflation was cooling. Now inflation's at a 3-year high, 3.8%. I didn't even bring up the PPI numbers just came out. So I'm always concerned, but we'll do our best. I don't have any personal animus with Oz. I've seen him a few times, including the White House correspondence, and you know, it's not that. But he works for someone that's difficult, and I imagine those guys are directed to do certain things that even they know aren't necessarily in the best interest of the American people that happen to be residents of different states, particularly those that tend to have a hue that looks blue.
Governor, you said you knew this question was coming on the
Which
$50 premium
Okay,
service with
well, I guess now
unsatisfactory immigration status. You said you believe that is fair, but to be fair, it's not just the premiums, right? It's frozen enrollments for undocumented adults that already started this year. Dental benefits will be restricted starting in July. They're now being transitioned to fee-for-service coverage, and the stack tracking is after historic expandments for Medicaid coverage for for immigrants in the last years. Obviously, there's huge budgetary pressure from HR1.
You're answering better than I am.
But what do you say to the immigrants and the advocates who.
No one in the country has done more, and no one has done better to address their anxiety and needs. And the fact that we capped it is in stark contrast to other states that cut those that were already enrolled. We didn't do that. And to the extent that we made that expansion, no one in the country has even come close to the expansion that we still have today because of the historic nature of those investments. Across the spectrum, it's just one of literally dozens and dozens of examples of areas where we support our mixed status families and our undocumented community in ways that we're criticized 24/7 for doing, and will be on the basis of this conversation unquestionably in one of the nightly roundups. So, and I'll defend that support, and to the extent we are forced to make decisions, that's called reality. It's called math, it's a difficult thing, and we try to do it in a thoughtful way. It was originally $100. They went down to 30, I think 50 under the circumstances, but if people are going to disagree, and the legislature will have their opportunity, and that's why I love the back and forth. None of these are things I want to do. I just try to find some balance here. I don't want to put it on the back of, there's some other cuts and other programs that I didn't want to do either. Developmental, there's a lot of issues. But I'm very proud of the fact we're doing what we're doing. No one comes close.
On the topic,
I'm right back here. Right back.
Thanks, Governor. In terms of the withholding of funds for education K-12 from Prop 98, originally it was $5.6 billion. Now it's down to $3.9 billion. California Teachers Association say they're still very disappointed with that. What do you say to them and everyone else who are struggling to hire? I know you said that, look, you're spending a lot, but you're still withholding a lot.
What I say is 4.31%. What I say is $5 billion on professional development. What I say is unprecedented supports in terms of community schools and expansions on after school, before school, and summer school. And the work we're doing across the spectrum, the unprecedented investments per pupil that you saw highlighted today. So we made some accommodation to that concern, and I would just have them look at the entire balance sheet and be hard pressed to find an administration over a 7-year period that's invested more in transforming our TK brand new grade to 12 education system, and that would be my response to that question.
The costs have gone up, so you say you're spending a lot more, but so have the costs.
The unprecedented historic investments per pupil, investments that are the envy of many other states. I was looking back, forgive me, but in 2010, 2011, we were competing with Utah for the lowest investments in education in the country. I think a year or two ago, we were getting close to being in the top 10 with these investments, which again, forgive me, I feel like I must go back because these investments are rather extraordinary. By contrast, maybe it takes too long.
Governor, you sound
Well, hold on, everybody. I'm not going anywhere. You may have a deadline, but this is a short presentation compared to previous years. So I'm going to take advantage of because I think it's really important. You're looking at scarcity. I'm looking at abundance. I'm looking at $10.3 billion in a reserve. I'm looking at unprecedented investments in education with unprecedented expansions in programs and supports for education and educators. I'm looking at 14 weeks to take care of our workforce and doing that at scale. I'm looking at a super COLA that we didn't need to do. 2.87% was a statutory requirement. I'm looking at massive investments in literacy. I'm listening to our workforce, our administrators, our teachers, what they need, what they want. They wanted this, we delivered it. They wanted this, we went further, because this is what they originally asked for. We went further. So these are pretty healthy investments. And this chart in particular is 80% increase since I've been here in Prop 98 money. I think more than resolves that anxiety.
Governor, can you speak more about your intention with state employees and the return to office? Is that just the start of negotiations?
No, I want to get it done. Look, change is hard. Change is hard. I'm empathetic. Everybody has unique criteria, circumstances. By the way, we try to accommodate for that. 4 days a week. Nice to see you again. I mean, Hey, nice to see you again. Nice to see you again. Nice to run into you in the hall. Nice to develop a relationship. Nice to not feel so alone. Nice to feel like we're all in this together. Nice to have a different perspective and understanding on the basis of the interaction I just had. Nice to build a sense of team and community. I just think that's important. Most employers do as well. And so, while I'm empathetic to change, we've been previewing this for years now, and we want to get it done.
Governor, just taking a big step back, and with this being your last one, do you have any regrets, anything you would do differently between like January of 2019 to today?
Nothing, not one thing. Maybe a few outfits. I mean, come on, of course. But I regrets in terms of the budget, or just in my life.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Like COVID. I mean,
Okay, COVID. Yeah, I regret that happened. No, come on. Hey, look, I'm you know, I think you were at the water event. I'll be doing a series of events, laying out the theory of the case when I got here. That was the first of, I think, a dozen of those, maybe less. I think I began this by giving you a sense of where we began and where we went. I had a theory of the case, tried to execute it, tried to hold ourselves to a higher level of accountability, higher than you hold me to account, in terms of transparency, what we promised, promoted, what we were able to achieve, what we fell short. You know, the struggles that continue to this moment on 1115 waivers, and the challenges of an administration that's back, you know, and the remaining volatility. You know, I said it years ago, and it was stubborn, and the public wasn't with us on the Prop 2 reforms. It would have been great to capture those early on. I would sort of mark, as you framed your question, consideration of those 2 very abundant years. Then again, we've been able to draw down from those one-time resources over the last many years, which has been a buffer, and I don't think is broadly understood as it should be in the context of how did we get through the last few years of volatility without profound and more consequential cuts. So there are a lot of those things that we could look back, but again, you have political capital today, you didn't have that. You have different legislative leadership, you have different public consciousness and opinion, you have different president, different way, you know. So all those things, you know, I don't tend to wallow in that. But I'm trying to run, I think, just most importantly, because it's, to me, it's not about the rear view, it's about the windshield. It's just, you know, run the 110-yard dash. You know, they'll run me out, you'll run me out of here, and I'm gonna still be working until that last damn day, next January, and finishing the job, finishing what we committed, fully implementing, addressing that wonderful question on mental health, which I assure you I'm looking forward to answering, and making sure we drive that accountability as we continue to do on homelessness and housing at the local level. No, that's where my mindset is.
Counties say they're wholly unprepared to deal
Be
with
shorter in the responses.
Counties say they're wholly unprepared to deal with the impact of HR 1 and accuse your administration of doing to them what the federal government did to them, forcing cuts to sheriff, fire, homelessness. How did you weigh their ask and come to the support you allocated?
And their assertion is that we're making dramatic cuts to their programs.
Sorry, that you're just not.
But it just seems to me a completely different frame. HR 1 made dramatic cuts to programs. I appreciate your reflecting on there. So on the county side, we talked about the $1.1 billion projected revenue that they'll be generating. So I hope they may want to update their question in the context of what they may, unless they just learned about that and said that's nominal or insignificant. I think it's very meaningful in terms of new revenue. As it relates to workload, I think it's $236 million. Was that the number?
262.
See, dyslexia. 262. That we put in the budget, which I hope they are aware of as well, but they may want to consider that support specifically.
Medical was now 36.
And there's the money for CalFresh. So we provided a number of supports that may not have been in evidence when they expressed their concerns. Look, I was a county mayor. I know how this works. And I know it's not easy. It's not easy being a governor. And, Trump hardly has our back. And, but the abundance of support we provided to the cities and counties across the spectrum of issues in the last 4 or 5 years is pretty significant. And to the extent that this will require them to do things differently in the next few years, Trump administration, we all are going to have to do things differently. And I'm certainly aware of that and appreciate that requires some change. And as I say, change has its enemies.
Governor Newsom, you are talking about moving undocumented immigrants from managed care to fee for service.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to save ultimately over $1 billion a year, it looks like. You are kind of blaming some federal changes on that. Can you expand on that? Because most of these federal changes have not applied to
Well, fee for service is a direct result of the federal government. And that's, I think it's a $1.5 billion, my recollection serves me.
$1.5 billion total fund, 1.2 general fund.
Yeah, so that's the impact. But
is this cost saving, or is this really the federal government is forcing you to do this?
it's a federal requirement under the new laws.
Can you expand on that?
I don't know what more I can expand on than that. So to the extent that someone else can unravel it and then come up with $1.2 billion to offset it and litigate it or challenge it, but it's the estimated savings, and Joe is the one that ultimately
Will those
is
savings
accountable.
come from will those savings come from people getting less care?
To quickly, the 1.2 billion is the amount of reduced cost from transitioning them from managed care to transitioning this population from managed care to fee for service. We're required to do it because there's a new federal rule that they will not reimburse states for emergency services through risk-based managed care systems. So if we were to keep them in the managed care system, we would not receive the federal reimbursements, which would be a lot more money that the state would lose. And so because of that federal rule, we're required to transfer to fee-for-service. Same, they would be in full scope Medi-Cal in fee-for-service, so they're not losing Medi-Cal. There are, there's two specific CalAIM mentioned earlier, enhanced care management and community supports, that those are the only difference in terms of services that they would not be, that wouldn't be part of the fee-for-service model because those are specifically managed care services.
Governor,
Great response.
your friends at the LAO reported that
My
spending
friends,
in 2019.
I like the LAO. I like the fact they were off by 53 million.
When they said spending since 2019 during your tenure has outpaced revenue by about 10%, your budget plan here tucks away a lot of this windfall for future years, but at the same time, you're still expecting the structural deficit to persist in 28-29.
Well, I mean, in 2030, 2040, I mean, yeah. So, but we've eliminated in the next 18 months. We've have a 2-year budget. We've addressed the short term. We've addressed the medium term, and to the extent we're single digits in the out years, things are going to radically change. So just the next 6 or 9 months. So, look, I mean, you go to fill in a state. They're not this ability to sort of for people to solve for 20. The goalpost keeps moving. Well, solve for 2036. We solve for not just the year. I could have gotten out of here with a 12-month solution, stacked up, a lot of wins, not had any of these questions about any of these other cuts, and then really sucked into the next administration. But I think this has been balanced in terms of how we've done it with the revenue proposals here that will be ongoing and will help support some of these commitments we've already made going forward into those out years. And we're hopeful with the Democratic administration in 2028. More importantly, perhaps just the ability to push back against these cuts with the Jeffries speakership, that we also may have some better news in terms of the projections that are baked into this budget in terms of cuts that may not materialize because Congress has changed hands. So all of those things are a criteria of consideration in those out years, but solving through July of 2028, cutting those longer term concerns by more than half, I don't think it's insignificant. I think it's profoundly consequential.
Are you
Governor,
worried at all about your, L-word programs that would exist, or whether they would be able to be sustained into the future? Legacy?
You're not allowed to
I knew
use
you
that
would just
word.
not answer the question if I said it.
I just, look, I hope we can continue to make the kind of investments in healthcare. I hope we continue to transform the mental health system. I hope we can continue to make the investments we've made in housing and homelessness and investments in the, our 30 by 30. I mean, I don't, I'll be out there doing 12 speeches, so you'll hear all about all these investments, and certainly just even in the education space. But I did it in partnership with the legislature. So we have partners. I did it in partnership with parents. I did it in partnership with, leaders. And so it has a lot of mothers and fathers. It's not about me. I could have named my Trump accounts, Newsom accounts. Maybe that would have gotten whacked. But there's 5.5 million kids that got those Trump accounts before Trump ever considered it. And so I've tried, outside the ballroom, which I think I deserve. Try not to make it about me and make it about all of us.
Governor,
I just gotta get
you
to
said you're still catching up on the details, but today's plea deal and the Dana Williamson case overall, it is a very big deal. I mean, the latest developments, do you have any concerns that there could be potential implications for yourself and also Javier Becerra, the gubernatorial?
Well, I don't for me at all, period. But so no, and I can't answer on the basis of another person.
That is a big attack he has been getting in the gubernatorial race.
It's back to. He'll have to answer that.
Governor, what is your position on the California voter ID ballot measure that's going to come before voters in
I
November?
haven't read it, and I say that because I'm mindful of the SAVE Act, which I read and then realized it wasn't about voter ID. Maybe this one is. SAVE Act was about voter registration. It was about a lot of other issues. So I don't have the benefit of actually having analyzed what it is and what it isn't. So let me defer the response. I will certainly have it every year. As you know, I tend to be very vocal about my positions on ballot initiatives, and I'll certainly be if this one does end up on the ballot.
Governor, on the county obligations, one of the
Oh no, sorry. Just there's 3 or 4 people haven't spoken.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Governor. So in terms of these limits on corporate tax credits that you're proposing in this May revise, I know Democrats in the state legislature, particularly in the Senate, have floated the idea of imposing a new tax on top earning corporations. Do you have any reaction to that proposal, or do you see this as an alternative to that, or maybe an alternative to the billionaire's wealth tax that you don't support?
I don't see it in the context of being an alternative or in a reaction. This is what I believe we can do and should do to advance the structural, to address structural concerns in our budget, and to have a positive SFEU in 2028. So no, I think this is my preferred approach. Legislature is their responsibility, and certainly been their want. They put out some alternative proposals. One of the houses did, not both houses, and they may have others, and we'll dialogue and debate about it.
Governor,
It's just anyone who hasn't spoken.
Yes, thank you. Speaking of deferral, CMS yesterday deferred $1.3 billion in Medicaid money to California, which it says the largest deferral they ever done. Are you confident that California will eventually get this money, and are you worried that could be a beginning of the federal government essentially just withholding all Medicaid money to the state?
Well, it's not the beginning. It's part of the ongoing drama with the Trump administration. That again started with UCLA and those 800 grants they tried to cut to $584 million, the $1 billion, bribe, whatever they're calling it, the fine that they're still trying to advance at UCLA, and the hundreds of billions. I mean, it's over $100 billion of cuts they've tried to take from the state that we've been able to fight back successfully in the courts. So we've been at this. 67 lawsuits, at least as of a couple of days ago. Maybe AG announced another lawsuit today, but we've been in 67 lawsuits. I don't even think it's been 67 weeks in the administration. All of them in response to these assaults and these attacks. I think it's interesting on IHSS. IHSS is about keeping people out of nursing facilities. Cost of IHSS is roughly about $30,000. By the way, it's been bipartisan. Democrats and Republicans have made the case for in-home support services over the high cost, $137,000 a year of a SNF, a skilled nursing facility, as an example. That should be celebrated. By the way, it should be also considered and celebrated that California's costs as it relates to SNFs and nursing homes has actually been pretty flat compared to the national average as a consequence of our investments in IHSS. So yeah, I'm concerned about it, but I'm not surprised. This seems to be a mantra of this administration to continue to advance. There's a few others that haven't.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Governor. Last year, your administration called back the state's 21 bargaining units representing state employees to reduce employee compensation costs, which included suspending retirement contributions and personal leave programs. Do you plan to call those bargaining units back to the bargaining table, given that the state's in a much better bargaining position now?
Well, on the basis of the presentation today, I don't think we have any additional comments on that. I think we're status quo ante in terms of where we landed in terms of the May revise. So, again, that may be a question for the next administration.
Governor, on county obligations, one of the biggest things obviously is healthcare. The LAO has estimated that because of federal changes, including the Medicaid changes and the ACA subsidy changes, that up to 1 million people in California could try to get back on indigent care programs in California, which existed much more before our expansion in the Medi-Cal. Those systems don't get funded by the state anymore. Those systems basically partially don't exist for the most part. What is California supposed to do to account for all these folks who will lose coverage? And
we'll have to work through it. This is what I did as mayor of San Francisco. My responsibility as a mayor to work with state and local government to get creative. A lot of creative local programs and strategies. And, as these things unfold, we'll have to meet these things head on. Let me just be specific. We in January we had an estimate of number of people we thought would fall off the rolls. It's substantially lower than we expected because of interventions and strategies. And we continue that mindset. We'll continue to work with the cities and counties, look at best practices, look at strategies as it relates to making people that are eligible, for these workfare programs, make sure they're getting, assigned, and making sure they're getting the paperwork done, making sure that the application comes back up, they're being supported in that respect as it relates to county adult assistance. Intimate familiarity there. I did something called Care Not Cash years ago as a mayor that was a radical reform for indigent care, and it's an example of a creative strategy for indigent care it was done at the county level. That's adjacent to your specific question. It's just an example of working with cities and counties to address these issues as they unfold, and we'll continue to keep an open mind in that respect.
Governor, on Calif, I know that the state has branded generic insulin, naloxone. A two-part question for
One
you.
more soon.
What is that?
Maybe I should have said that.
Do you argue that the state's generic drug label has been a success? And whatever happened with the manufacturing facility? I thought there was $50 million for that. Had the state abandoned the plan to actually?
Yeah, we pulled back on that with the legislature last year, and we talked to the legislature about that in last year's budget.
So no more plans to manufacture?
No, we've decided to move forward in this partnership, which we think is more effective and efficient on the biosimilar strategy. We're waiting for that final approval from the feds, and then we'll be able to move forward with the new and expanded program. But so far, in the back, look, it was about 6 weeks ago that I got an update on the uptick in terms of people taking advantage of the $11 insulin, and I was very pleased with the results. But that was a number of weeks ago, so we'll keep looking at that, and looking forward to getting that approval finally from the Trump administration, so that we can move forward to this much more expanded program.
What's the next drug?
That was my mistake. Anyone else who hasn't asked a question? Okay.
Yeah. Can you talk about the Corcoran Honor Fund? Do you see it as a scalable program across CDCR, or is this like a one-time situation?
Yeah, we'll see. Look, I'm very proud of the California model. I'm proud of the work we've done across the system. I'm proud that, so this is a component part of all of this. Obviously, San Quentin was the next level version of that. And turning it to a rehabilitation facility, or at least primary focus now. It's on rehabilitation. So play it by ear. I mean, it's a very awkward thing for me because I'm my last at bat here in terms of the future. But look, every pilot, every one-time opportunity to demonstrate a proposal or pilot, we hope it's successful, and success leaves clues. And to the extent it can be replicated, that's great. Forgive me. There was some. I'm thinking about something else that Pravda Network did something yesterday in Fox on a related topic. Sorry.
No Prop 36 funding?
Prop 36 still has money from the $100 million a few years ago. It still has the money from Prop 47, which I think is another $89.1 million in this budget. Still has the ability to attach billions and billions of dollars of new funding that's flooded the zone in all of these other areas that can be used to address the need. I think this is we've been talking about this enough, and those resources still exist from the prior appropriation, which I think says everything you need to know.
Hey, Governor.
Can limit rainy day fund on the November ballot?
Well, I think we got to get the rainy day fund doubled, and to the extent the GAN limit that no one understands what that means or is, and makes it an impediment in terms of trying to get the public to jump up and down and support it. This has been not a regret; it's just a reality over the years. But we're seeing what we can do administratively, legislatively, I should say, and I think we're going to land in a good place. Maybe not, don't make perfect the enemy of good. It's a Voltaire moment. But yeah, we need to, I think, foundationally reform that broader GAN consideration. But in the interim, let's just at least focus on the reserve.
Is public support greater for it now than 2019?
I haven't. I confess I've been seeing a lot of polling. I haven't seen GAN on the polling list, but we can maybe add it.
Governor, can you go into more details about how the MCO tax revenue can stay in the billions in the future years? Because
I'll let these guys have at it. They can get into all the details of the new construct on MCO and the new challenges as relates to
But
Trump
are you not worried
administration.
about that money dipping into the millions, like what's been shared?
Of course, I'm worried about. I'm Irish. I worry everything. Yeah, of course. But it's just not. It's all these questions sort of beg the question. We're not fixed in our mindset. It's about being open. We're constantly. It's absorb, understand, decisions, not conditions, make adjustments, fix things quickly as you can in real time. It's the nature of all this. I don't know. Maybe you're glad I'm out of here because I'm just not as rigid in my stress on some of these things. But I'm always, I know one thing, and that is I know what I don't know, and I also know that this administration is challenging, and and I don't think they play by any rules. They make up the rules as they go, and so I worry about that for the future of the state, our nation, the world we're trying to build, and so that's reflected in concerns around anything that has a federal overlay and relationship to the federal government at the moment.
Did you mention water's edge tax?
I did not.
Your thoughts on that?
I don't have any for today.
For today?
For today. I have a lot of thoughts, but yeah, it's an interesting conversation that I know that candidates for governor, dare I say, opening that bolt door, have discussed, and to the extent legislative leaders want to discuss it, we can have that conversation.
Can I answer your question about your legacy? And in reality, a lot of what I'm thinking about your inauguration and everything you've made a stake on in terms of vulnerable Californians and healthcare and Medicaid and homelessness. You have done a lot of unprecedented investments and really, I think, shifted the vision for California in terms of helping the most vulnerable. And a lot of what you have put your stake in is at risk. Does that keep you up at night? Do you worry about that? And and I'm also wondering if you do run for president, is that something you think you can fix at the federal level?
Yeah, no, look, I can only control what I can control. I can't control what's out of my control. I can try to influence it. I just think a lot of, look, back to, I said this, the power of emulation. I do think, if something produces real results, it's gonna be hard for folks to unravel it. If it doesn't, falls short, by definition, it should be augmented and fixed, as I would too. I mean, we push things out, they don't work as well as we wanted, we start to adjust and fix and amend, and I hope that that's the mindset for whoever comes in. And to the extent they wanna name it themselves or name it, that's, those are things that, I simply can't control. And anyone that tries to control that, I think is left wanting and in therapy.
Governor, what's your reaction to redistricting being challenged?
How big was it? I don't know. Let's check it out. But in the spirit of Brown, it's the spirit of this slide right there. It's in the spirit. Yes, in his spirit. In his spirit. In the spirit of Jerry Brown. I'll say it's reflected in this. I'm serious. Yeah, but we're both Jesuits. I didn't realize I was a Jesuit. But now I realize I am. I'm morphing into them. You're lucky there's term limits, because I could come back at 90 and not be like 50. But no, absolutely. And I said that from day one. I thought that was incredibly important. It was part of, dare I say, his legacy. And that was foundational for me. And I made that crystal clear with legislative leaders. And it was stubborn, because it was hard. A lot of them, we'll see how they respond. I mean, you'll get everybody and say, I'm out right. But I think it's important, and this slide was important to me, and I made that. I said this is the red line for us, and I think in many respects, once a mind's stretched, never goes back to its original form. Jerry was one of the first to do that in a long time. In the past it was just short-termism. It was just get the hell out of Dodge, and that didn't service the state. And so I think it's deeply part of his legacy, and I want it to continue. And we were very indulgent. I mean, I'm not naive about the investments we made. I'm also proud of them, and I want to defend them. And it goes to the prior questions. I think they're important. I thought they were long overdue. I didn't think we were investing in the healthcare space for years. I didn't think we were investing in homelessness and housing. We didn't have a strategy. We didn't have a plan. We didn't. And we weren't doing enough for healthcare. We weren't doing enough for families. It's like the diaper thing. You've got a guy who needs that math remedial that was lying about how much the diapers. I thought it was important. 2 free meals is important. Preschool for all is important. That needed to be done, and I'm proud of the fact that got done. And I just don't see those things unraveling necessarily. But you can do it without being profligate, and that's the spirit of the slide. No massive general tax increases. Tweaks, adjustments. No fixed mindset. It wasn't someone else's projection that we worked off of. It was an understanding in real time the changes in our economy. And in Washington D.C. and so I hope that will be the spirit reflected in the next administration, unquestionably. But I hope they can achieve this on their way out.
Governor, what's your reaction to redistricting activities in the country since the Supreme Court?
Jim Crow 2.0 is sick. Stone cold racism on a scale I never thought I'd see in my lifetime. Never have seen in my lifetime. It's all happening, bringing us back to a pre-1960s world. It's jaw-dropping what's happening. It was jaw-dropping what Governor Landry did. He suspended a primary election where tens of thousands of people had already voted. Why? To redistrict 2 districts to eliminate black representation. I can't believe that we're experiencing this. My parents talked to me about this. I said, well, thank God it's not going to happen in my lifetime. And it's happening in real time. Anti-woke is anti-black. All these attacks on DEI, it's anti-black. Level of racism is sick. Rewriting history, censoring historical fact. Number of African Americans have been eliminated from key positions and posts. The Pentagon and elsewhere, it's sick. It's happening in the United States of America in the open. It needs to be called out. So forgive me for reacting this way. And I feel a deep responsibility to do something about this. Nothing to do with me as governor, just as a human being. This is not why our founding fathers lived and died. It was about the expansion of liberty, expansion of freedom, including more and more people. We're seeing exactly the opposite take shape under this administration.
Governor, back to your worries and maybe what keeps you up at night. You said that you hope that the state will continue its historic investments in, again, this coverage for undocumented immigrants, but is there any concern that
I'm concerned about that. That's an easy place for people to go. We made significant investments. Yeah, I mean, of course I'll make a case for it. I'm making a case for it. That's why we didn't, we had to deal with reality, deal with the cards that are dealt. We had to slow down that growth, and we did. And but we'll make a case for it. You know, we have universal health care in this country, regardless of pre-existing condition, ability to pay, and regardless of immigration status. We have it. It's called the emergency room. And we're paying on the back end sick care. I believe in universal health care. It was not, I ran on it. I did it as mayor of San Francisco. I ran on it as governor. And so no one could be surprised about my point of view. And I defended it. And there's a whole cottage industry out there attacking me because of that advocacy. Trying to balance all these concerns as I balance the budget, and trying to do it in a way that I think is consistent with my values and the values that we hope to hear in this state.
Governor, on that advocacy, you mentioned just now that you did run on single payer when you were running for governor. There's a number of candidates now who are debating it's become quite a big issue in the current Democratic field, of which you have not endorsed. What's your advice for the next governor?
Well, seek first to understand before you're understood. CalRx comes out of our strategies. The first executive order I drafted comes out of our strategies to pursue single payer purchasing. We created a task force. We created a framework and a plan that was just highlighted. Created a commission in this space, and we laid out a lot of progress. It's been promoted and discussed here today in terms of advancing the principle, but you have one giant impediment. That's besides this, you got challenges getting a simple 1115 waiver from the current administration. So I think that may be a bit of a stumbling block. It's not an indictment on a principle. I think single payer is inevitable in this country. Period. Full stop. The healthcare system is simply devouring the public sector and devouring the private sector budgets. There's no alternative from my perspective. I call total BS on all the fake tinkering that the Republican Party claims or some new idea proposal that's coming out next week. Donald Trump. For 10 years he's been talking about that since he came down the escalator. Nothing in this space. I appreciate and applaud what Nancy Pelosi was able to achieve, and what President Obama was able to achieve, what President Biden was able to achieve in expanding the support. What we're doing here in covered California, that I think is next level, and what we did to advance even further and beyond. But I do think the system itself is simply, you talk about structural problems, it's inevitability. So the question is, can a state do it? A state cannot do it alone. It's going to require a level of partnership and largesse of the federal government that is not in evidence, that is not an indictment of the vision, the proposal, or the direction that some of the candidates are promoting. I intend to share it.
Is it possible to do in 8 years in the 2 terms they might have, given that
you're going to require, as I said, it cannot happen without the largesse of the American people, Congress, and the president. By definition, it requires significant waivers and reforms at the federal level. And I assure you, on the basis of the efforts when I was governor, working in the beginning of my administration with then President Donald Trump, who immediately rejected our outreach on many of these waivers. There's a lot of letters I'll remind you of, some that were responded to, some that weren't. And I think it's even more challenging now in that respect. I just think you may want to have if that's the only strategy you have for healthcare, you may want to have a backup penny. That's all. Even though it's the right, I think, and inevitable. It will be inevitable in this country. No question of when. I don't know.
Another point on
UI debt that the state has to the federal government. Any movement? I know you said a couple years ago.
I know I'm 0 for 2, and I decided maybe I didn't want to strike out 0 for 3 this year. But look, it's got to be addressed. It's real. Something we had to deal with during the Schwarzenegger administration. Only comparable example, and we were able to pay it back, claw back over the course of years. We're doing that. I think 668.3 or something million in the interest on this, and so it's real. And we've directed. There's some language in the budget specifically to direct our workforce agency on some creative strategies and solutions to address it. I don't want to leave the next governor without those considerations. So there's going to be a series of recommendations and proposals. But at this stage, based upon my conversations yet again with the legislature, And the inability, even when we had more resources to move, we just, it's not reflected here in this proposal. And it's incredibly important.
One more thing on what you said about redistricting, you said
What
you
about
feel a responsibility to do something,
Yeah.
you have a plan, like,
Well, I
are
can't
you?
solve for everything, but I just want to call it out. I just feel like Prop 50 was a big part of it. In terms of pushing back, what happened in the Supreme Court, 4-3 decision in Virginia was extraordinary. It was equally extraordinary that Ron DeSantis announced his maps on Fox as a Fox exclusive. Next day, without any real debate, they approved them. Contrast that to Virginia, that went through a very deliberative and transparent and democratic process. What just happened in Tennessee is sick. The governor just did there. What's happening, Landry's doing. What's happening in these other states. So this is, my state of mind is, this is what I'm, people in the past rightfully said, well, it's just, he's crying wolf. He's overstating all these things. Well, I may have been understating the importance of Prop 50, the importance of pushing back, importance of fighting fire with fire. These guys are ruthless. They're not screwing around. They're, rewriting history, censoring historical facts, and they're bringing us back to the Jim Crow era in terms of African-American representation. It's sick. So we've got to be aggressive. We've got to call it out. I'm surprised it's not more dominant in our national discourse. We're so damn distracted by every true social, and it's understandable. All this, understandable outrage. But this is happening on our watch, and so I'm one of our, and in my watch included, and I feel a sense of responsibility to respond as I've responded. Good people could disagree. Maybe, curious people would disagree. I don't know, but most good people would agree, I think. They see their eyes wide open. It's just about power, period, full stop. Speaker Johnson. We'll lose our country. We'll lose our republic. It's 250th anniversary. And I just think this summer, I think it's going to be very busy. Alabama and Mississippi and in the South. I think a lot of people have a lot more freedom rides and a lot of new generation. I was at Jesse Jackson's funeral, and so his legacy is alive, and the people that were in that audience that will be out there marching the streets anew, and the next civil rights heroes are going to be born at this moment. They need to be, to call out what's happening. And it's not just 2026; it's 2028. And so your question was not that. It was like, do you have, Governor, any specific ideas what to do now in terms of redistricting to address these issues? And the answer is not specific.
Last question.
Governor, one more one on healthcare. Senate Democrats specifically have proposed a fair share contribution plan. And some Democrats have also said they're open to
fair share.
Share contribution plan, basically.
Oh, that sounds good. Fair share is good. What topic?
Are you on board with it? Basically requiring on healthcare.
Oh, okay.
Basically requiring some of the major corporations in the state to pay into Medi-Cal.
I'm satisfied with the proposal.
So would you back it? Is that
I'm satisfied with the proposals that we got.
Governor Newsom, you really don't seem like someone who's ready to leave office. Are you going to run for president?
I just want to where's my ballroom again? By the way, this is pretty good. The picture is pretty good.
Are you going to run for president?
Look at you. You're first. I'm going to leave you with this slide.
For life after
I need a job. I'm going to need a job. I'm in healthcare. I worry about that. This is why this healthcare conversation. Yeah, if I have minimum wage is higher under our watch. I like that.
Is that a yes?
That's good. What do you think? Jerry Brown, eat your heart out. That's really good.
All right.
Well,